Dr. Michael Tillman here with Tillman's Body Talk. This is Nikki Torres. I'm a physical therapist. She's in physical therapy assistant school, and today we're going to talk about the deadlift. Nikki, what do you know about the deadlift?
Well, the deadlift is a great functional movement. It translates into real life movements and what we do every day in our lives. We pick things up off the floor. So we want to do things that protect our spine when we're picking those things up.
Exactly. You know, I have patients all the time, and I'm like, if your legs are weak, if your posterior chain is weak, how can you protect your back? So Nikki's going to show you how she approaches the bar, and then I'm going to be there to throw my 2 cents in, and hopefully this information will be good for you. So why do you like the deadlift?
I find the deadlift to be a very functional movement. You're picking up kids up off the floor. Usually people just lean over and pick them up. This is a way to teach that movement, a functional movement, in a safe way where we're not risking injury to anything in our low back. Mike talked about the posterior chain. That's going to be anything from the neck down to the back of the knee. We're strengthening all those muscles with one movement. So when you approach the bar, you're going to set up with your feet about hip width apart. Just a slight turn out of the toes, not much, and that's just to activate the glutes a little bit. From here, nice good posture. From the top of the skull through the tailbone, shoulders back. You're going to hinge the hips back. Push them back like you're closing a car door. The bar is going to start off close to your shins. I want my hands about thumbs width outside of my thighs and legs. Out of the way of my knees.
And the whole reason she said out of the way of her knees is because the knees will come out a little bit and they'll start pushing out like this so that she can use her glutes more. So if her hand is too close to the knee, she's going to push her knee in, and that's going to make it collapse and put more pressure on the back. Again, you want to try to use as much posterior chain as you can.
Now, as we lift up on the bar, we're going to keep that same posture, shoulders back, spine nice and straight. You're going to push through the heels. Tendency for a lot of people is to come into the toes, and you'll notice that when your knees are hanging over the bar. I want my knees slightly over the bar. Push through the heels, lift to the knee, and then push the hips through the window you've created with your arms. And then going down, just hinge back, put that bar down. Knees, hips, then knees.
And you can see how straight she's keeping her back, how much muscle she's using. You can see just by watching him. So it's very efficient. And as she gets heavier, it becomes increasingly important to understand the deadlift, to understand pushing your knees out, to understand that your feet are trying, they call it the screw home mechanism, where you're trying to push out. You see how that makes my knee go out? Because I want to use my glutes. But you can see she goes up, she keeps the bar really close, because the closer it is, it's just physics, it's a lot less force.
I am practically shaving this bar up my leg. I'm activating my lats so that the bar isn't floating out in front of me, which makes me want to round my back.
So what about your eyes? When you do a deadlift, where do you look?
I'm trying to keep my neck in line with my spine, so I'm looking slightly in front of me, and then I bring my eyes up to the horizon, and then back down to the floor. People want to watch the bar, which is bad neck posture. People want to look up at the horizon, which is bad neck posture.
Exactly, because once you start getting out of that alignment, the other parts want to follow. So if her head's down, she's going to want to round, or if her head's too up. She really wants to keep this as rigid and use as much of the posterior chain as she can to become efficient, especially if you're doing a max lift, or even if you're doing a whole lot of reps. You just want it consistent. You want to be able to use your posterior chain in the big muscles and not the little muscles. That's the deadlift. You saw some tips and techniques. Now we're going to dissect it a little bit more. And so Nikki, what do you do, the difference between doing a lot of reps and doing like a max deadlift? What are some good pointers that you can give us?
Yeah, so I see that a lot, especially in the gym, when somebody's got, a metabolic conditioning workout where they're required to do maybe 30 deadlifts for time, and the weight's generally lighter than it would be for a max deadlift, a 1 rep max, and so form kind of just flies out the window. So we want to, form always comes before speed. You want perfect form Otherwise, the speed doesn't even matter. Who cares if you're the fastest deadlifter in the world? If you did it with crappy form, you're just putting yourself at risk for injury. And nobody wants that.
Correct. Too much emphasis on a PR versus my form looks great.
But if you're going for a 1 rep max, and you'll see it a lot, people just want that like extra 2 pounds, and they'll round the back for it, and that makes me cringe too. Stop rounding your back on deadlifts.
And when we talked about doing the deadlift video is we need you to understand the importance of form, and you have to train like that, and you know, the lighter reps should be all about form so that when you get into the max lifts, it's automatic. So don't compromise on, you know, 95-pound 30 for time, because if you do that, what are you going to do on a max deadlift?
Right, and I would definitely put that max deadlift more into the advanced deadlift.
Correct.
Than beginner intermediate. Now, what about your patients that have advanced from the eccentric hamstring workouts, and now they're moving on to deadlift?
Well, for me, the importance of a patient graduating into a deadlift Olympic movement is to apply all that isolation into a functional movement, because I want them, you know, we're training them, you know, with the arm ER, with the foot, you know, external rotation, so they can use their glutes, and we keep hammering glutes. You hear bridges, 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 you know, but what you want to do is actually teach them to use it, and that's why I love the deadlift. That's why I want to do a video on the deadlift, because it actually starts applying everything we've built in therapy to a functional lift. Like, how are you going to lift stuff off the ground? How are you going to pick up your kids? You know, do you know how to use your legs properly? And that, it goes from a deadlift to just how you sit. Like, hey, I sit with my knees out a little bit. Why? So when I stand up, I can use my glutes. There's so much functional in it. When you see someone who's older, who's having a hard time get up, you know they don't understand. When you see them get up and their knees cave in, you can see how they don't understand just the basics. Now, those basics are the same basics in a deadlift in elite athletes, and that's the purpose of the video. Is my patients to graduate to a deadlift just so they can understand it.
Okay, that makes sense.
All right, again, thank you for tuning in. Hope those tips help. This is Tillman's Body Talk on deadlift. Please like and share.